The Penre Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Third Level of Learning. http://wespenre.com. The Third Level of Learning. Paper Number 3, Channeled Entities Part 2, Channeling the Greys. By Penre, Wednesday, February 20, 2013. http://wespenre.com. Part 2. 2.2. Greys Speak. Q. Is there a way we can communicate with one of the Greys through you, by this process? Basher. Yes. Q. In the mass consciousness? Basher. Yes. Do you want this now? Q. Yes, I do. Basher. One moment, we will see if this is allowed. Greys, speak. Human, greetings, we enjoy having you here. Greys, enjoy? Human, enjoy, you don't understand an emotion, I suppose? We understand you have a lack of emotion. And that's why you are inbreeding with our race. Is that correct? Greys, we are blending. Human, blending. Greys, for our agenda of rectitude. Human, is your agenda going to be complete within this next short time span? Greys, your time span of a decade. Human, a decade. Greys, complete. Human, if it was not extended, if it was stopped short within this next month, would that affect your future race, your Essassani race? Greys, no stoppage is imminent. Therefore no discussion is needed of this point. Human, we feel that we do need to discuss this. This abduction scenario is. Greys, you may feel as you wish, no stoppage is imminent. Human, this abduction scenario needs to end. Greys, it will end when the agenda ends. Human, are you in enslavement of a draconian race, as of this moment? Greys, no, your information is erroneous. Human, you do this only for your self-preservation, is that correct? Greys, there are levels to our species, what you would call factions. Our faction is dying, our faction has need, our faction also recognizes that you are dying, our faction is attracted to your faction through death and resurrection of both species simultaneously, through the agreement of our simultaneously co-created agendas. Human, this is against free will of human nature. Greys, it is not. It is agreed, you have given your agreement on other levels. Human, you have technologically manipulated our free will in order to accomplish this. This is not allowed. Greys, you have emotionally usurped our will. Human, this is not allowed. Greys, this is allowed because you have created it. Human, and you have created your death scenario also. Greys, and you are creating yours. Human, we have passed that point. Greys, you have not. Human, your technology has put us to that point where we obviously became extinct a decade ago. Greys, you have not, you still have not allowed your world the balance it needs for there to be the transition as smoothly as it could. Human, the transition is happening right now. Greys, it is in process, and you see upheaval and what you call detrimental environmental impact around your planet. Human, well, we also see too that there's an abduction scenario that needs to stop and should not be continued any longer, it should be stopped at this present time. This is the mass consciousness of this planet of our free world. Greys, what you are referring to as stoppage is not stoppage that you seek, what you seek is transformation and equality of terms. You do not seek stoppage, you seek conscious participation. Human, well, our negotiations need to be re-evaluated. Greys, then evaluate them. Human, we are evaluating at the moment and this needs to cease. Greys, you do not need to evaluate them with us, you need to evaluate them with yourselves. Human, with you because technologically you are at an advantage point at this moment. Greys, you do not understand the concept of technology as we experience it. Human, and you do not understand love emotion, the energy that you need to exist with, and that's why you are becoming extinct. Greys, it is now through hybridization that we are beginning to connect to the understanding of what you experience and label as love energy, but you as species, do not exhibit love energy in the way you ask us to. Human, we are being manipulated at this point, and that's why we want our free will back, we want it back. Greys, you have your free will, you have no manipulation of your will with regard to your ability to express what you call your emotional context. Human, we do not want any more of your technology here on this planet, it is self-destructive. Greys, you have no more of our technology. Human, and it will be agreed upon. Greys, you have no more of our technology. What you experience as the idea you refer to as our technology is not our technology any longer. It is your technology, you have your faction, you have your structure, you have your military, you have your secret/shadow government. These are exploitation of your free will. We do not participate in that. Human, not at the present moment, but who has manipulated that to start that? Greys, in time, agreements were made between what were deemed to be the representatives of your world. You still allow those individuals to represent, but we are no longer engaged. Human, well, we do understand what you are saying with our emotions as you look at it, as our shortcomings, but we do as a mass consciousness want it to end. Greys, it will change, and in that it will experience what you call an end, but you are required to change before it can be experienced as an equal transition. Human, well, we are here and we know what is going on, and we do expect action, and we expect you to keep hold up your end of the bargain. Greys, our end is met. Your end is within yourselves. End of transmission. Human, thank you. Basher, one moment, did you have a satisfactory conversation with the entity? Q, pretty much. He's not very emotional, but I knew that. Basher, but you knew that? Q, yes, I knew that. I knew that I was dealing with a machine that. Basher, well, so to speak. You are dealing with a type of hive mentality. Q, right. Basher, you are dealing with an entity that only experiences, shall we say, the closest approximation of what you would call an emotion, the sensation of irony. Q, I see. Basher, and that is all that they can experience in that state. Now understand that what you asked to converse with, was one of the more primitive factions. We thought it best to simply start at the beginning with one of the older and more primitive factions. You must understand that they're already more evolved factions of what you call the Grey, but do understand more concretely the blending and incorporation of the emotional body. Q, and that is your future selves. Basher, yes, but in that sense, it is the idea that we gave you first as the opportunity to interact with, what you call, the foundation, so that the interactions could ripple upwards through the incorporation of the entity's hive mentality and have some kind of an effect, as you would say, up the line. Q, well, do you feel that I had an effect on him that you can see or feel at the moment? Basher, I feel that you had an effect on yourself, and that will make all the difference in their capability of interacting or not interacting with you, in the way that they determine that they must. That's the difference. Q, well, I just concerned with the present time and what is going on here. That's why I'm here. Basher, but watch your levels of fear, for you yourself, are exhibiting some of that vibration still. And the idea is that, as much of that vibration of fear and anger as you in yourself experience it, only reinforces the idea of the agenda that you say you would like to transform. Q, that is true. Basher, so you yourself must come from unconditional love, even as you state your preferences and stand your ground. That is what will create the equality of terminology that will allow conscious interaction and participation with the level of the Greys that ultimately does have the incorporation of the emotional body, sufficiently to understand what you are saying and interact with you on a more equal basis. Q, if they were to end their agenda at the moment and be prematurely short for months instead of a decade, how would that affect the Sasani race? Basher, it would not affect us since we are in what you would call a parallel reality time track. But, in terms of their reality time track, they would cease to exist. They would die. Q. They would die at the present moment? Basher, yes. Q. Is there any other way that you can salvage them or can save them in any other way, if they had to end it at this moment? Basher, one moment. Q. A cosmic reason? Basher, one moment, there was an offer made by another species to them as an alternative, that they rejected. This offer, if it can be, perhaps, translated into your language, would be something as follows. It was likened to the idea of offering to render their essence down into a mathematical construct, and to be deposited in an artificially created matrix. Until such time that evolution would allow there to be, incarnationally speaking, automatically bodies available for their constructs to evolve into, or incarnate into, that would allow them to express themselves and learn to express themselves in a more balanced way. However, they rejected this because they feared, from their fear, in that sense, as best as they can experience fear, that it was a trap. The idea being that they reflect that aspect of your civilization that does not trust itself, for they contain that idea of not trusting since they are not in balance with themselves, and therefore only deem themselves to be capable of deciding how it is that they should allow this agenda to play out, and will not allow others to help them in that sense. Q. Is there a way that we can have that negotiated? Basher, again, the idea is, to keep it at home. Allow yourself to strengthen your own unconditional love for yourself, and allow yourself to make the changes that you need to make within your own society, for it is only the changes that you need to make within your own society that will allow your society to have the collective critical mass to be able to deal with them on a more equal and loving basis. Q. Well, we also do have help from other entities from other sources. Basher, yes, of course. But help is not doing it for you. We cannot do that. It is your hands. You have had, and always do have, the free will. But, again, it comes down to the fear that exists within your society, and it is that needs to be transformed. Q. Also their fear of extinction. Basher, yes. But they are only reflecting and are attracted to your society, because your society also contains that kind of vibrational resonance. Q. I did understand that, yes. Basher, so, work on that and that will help them as well as yourself. Q. Okay, and tell them to work on theirs also. Basher, we do not need to. Q. I see, okay, well thank you for this communication. Basher, thank you. Isn't this clearly showing the reader what a mess we have got ourselves into? The person in the audience is trying over and over to convince the Greys that the abductions and their interference must stop. However, the Greys are, ironically enough, correct. There was an agreement made and the Greys are playing out their part in it. Our representatives, just like the Greys say, made the decisions for us, and the Greys will not stop until they are done, and by doing so, they are still not inflicting on free will, because they have our consent through our representatives. You see how they do it? This is Syrian tactics, as the reader has noticed from earlier papers, especially from level 2. We can also tell from what we discussed earlier, that this is a less advanced future Zeta/human hybrid, just like Basher indicates. Basher is right, too. We can't go out and more or less shoot Greys and think that it will take care of it. We have to work on our own fears and shortcomings. When we've done that, we can, as individuals and as a people, re-evaluate old agreements between humans and ETS and void those we don't like, but in our current sorry state, there is not much we can do, except inner work. It all comes back to that. Inner work and disagreement with being controlled by anybody outside of ourselves. It comes back to claiming our sovereignty as a species, and we don't do that by watching Bachelor on TV. What I am doing in these papers is that I bring our worst fears to the surface by telling it as it is. From what I have concluded in my research, please evaluate and keep and discard as needed, so we can process it on a conscious level instead of letting it sitting there, deep in our unconscious, unreachable, and used by the Syrian alliance as fear triggers. We have no choice but to look at our fears and our dark sides and evaluate them by recognizing them for what they are and let go. Hopefully, I'm being successful enough in doing this, and more people will, like I have, learn not to fear the dark side anymore. Some may say that they were never afraid of this in the first place, but they were, whether aware of it or not, or all this wouldn't have been buried away from them in their unconscious. Fear does that. Only reading this material shows you are a brave soul and are willing to look and make decision based on what you read. Much fewer people than you think are willing to confront these papers. 2.3. The collective we. Who are they? So where do the harvesters of souls come into the picture? This is a very interesting question, and I am not sure if the reader has figured it out yet or not. If not, no problem, because this is all tricky and quite manipulative. Have you ever wondered why almost all these channeled sources call themselves we? We are the Cassiopeans. We are the Elohim. We are the Zeta Reticuli. We are the Pleiadians. I can go on and on. Then we have IMRA, which is singular. However, RA explained to us that they are a social memory complex, and therefore a group consciousness, and that's what most of these channeled entities call themselves, group consciousness. But what does that really mean? Well, they tell us that this is natural evolution, and we present time humans will eventually be a group consciousness as well. Then they go on telling us that they are of 5th, 6th, 7th density, or whatever it may be, and when we reach the same level as they are at, we will be like them. But first, we must be subjected to a harvest before reaching each new density, and the harvest from 3rd to 4th density is now. So we'd better be prepared and have our heart chakras open, right? What happens is that many people stress out and ask themselves over and over, am I good enough? Will I be part of the harvest, or am I doomed? There is a lot of fear involved in this harvest process. As we shall see, there is this future human hybrid who tells us through Lisa Royal that machine technology is the natural way to evolve, and we need help to do it, help from those who know how to use nanotechnology. That is true for them, because they may not know better, but it's a lie. A species can, and is supposed to, evolve on their own, without external help. Now, let's think about it. Who else do we know who think of themselves as we, a collective, or a beehive community where the group is everything and the individual next to nothing? Ah! The Greys. So who can all these channeled sources be? You got it. They all have to be Greys, there is no other logical option. They all say 1, they are us in the future, 2, a group consciousness, 3, they are all giving us the same message, but from slightly different angles, so they can attract more truth seekers, and 4, they are able to channel love and light in huge quantities, which is done by machine technology, which we shall see later in this paper, while still sounding like monotonous machines, and 5, they all hope we'll make it through the harvest, so we can be like them. But why the harvest? Well, it's obvious that they want to change things on their future timeline, which ended up with the Basher group consciousness. In other words, they failed and are now coming back from different places in time and space to start all over again. They want a soul, that's what they want, and they want evolved souls. Why wouldn't they? They want as many spiritually evolved people gathered together as possible, focusing on one thing, the harvest. Then, when the harvest is happening, after this lifetime is over, they hijack our souls, steal our fire and try to figure out our emotion by researching our light bodies. And God knows what else they have planned to do with these people in the ether whom they subject to the harvest. We need to remember that the Greys don't necessarily look at themselves as evil, they simply want to survive, and we are their guinea pigs. They have no emotions and no remorse, so they can't see that it would be something wrong with using evolved souls, trying to figure out how they work. Even the Pleiadians say they are a collective. They are different, however, in that they want to stop the Greys' experiments, and they give us the option how to not participate in this quite horrendous future by creating an alternative timeline. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up being Greys as well, but are a splinter group who is hoping that they can ride on the wave we create when we naturally build a new future without being dependent upon technology. I am not saying this is the case, but it's a possibility. If so, they are still correct, because that's the way out. Yes, the Pleiadians say they are us in the future as well, but rather than saying they are the Greys, they claim to be those who mated with human women and created the Nephilim, but also contributed with their DNA, which is still in our bodies, in other words, the fallen angels. Therefore they are us in the future, and also our ancestors. So, that's a paradox, but like Hironi says, the quote is at the end of this paper, when we get into paradoxes, we are getting closer to the truth. And where are the Syrian alliance in all this? It looks like the tyranny and the machine people, the Greys, are related to humans, not Syrians. This may be so, but let's say something happens in the future, and the Syrians need to step back for a while and say, we didn't do it, it's the humans. They did it. And whatever created that situation forced the Zeta/Grey hybrids, the future humans, to rectify their past before they once again can be used for Syrian purposes. We know very little about what will happen in the future, and all we have here is the Greys' stories, and they are not complete. They simply tell it from the viewpoint of their searching for their holy grail, human emotions and sexuality. Another possibility is that the future humans/Greys are in fact controlled by the Syrians all the way through, even in the Greys' attempt to rectify themselves. Perhaps the Syrians are not happy either with how we humans turn out 2,000 to 10,000 years from now, and are indeed in charge of the Zeta program to recreate the human race in our present time and forward. The harvest would in that case be a part of that whole scheme. I would not be surprised if it ends up being this way. When I think about it, the only channeled source that comes to mind which is not a hive community is the Seth material by Jane Roberts. Seth is one individual, and I strongly recommend Jane's books, they are very enlightening. And I am pretty sure Seth is not a Grey. As long as we are in our current bodies, we can only raise our frequency so much during one lifetime. However, if we do what we can, become an inspiration for others, and continue to work on yourselves, that's the best we can do. Then, when our bodies die, and we eventually come back to Earth again, if this is what we decide to do, we will incarnate in a version of the world that matches our new frequency. Then, the next time around, it gets a little better again, and so forth. We will get ideas, or get together in groups to create whatever communities we wish to live in. The global elite, the Syrians, or whomever is on their wavelength, will probably still be here the first few lifetimes, because they still match the range of frequency we are operating within. However, each lifetime we will incarnate on a version of the Earth that has a higher frequency range than that of the previous lifetime, and soon enough those who do not vibrate within the same range will not be able to live in the same reality as we do. Then, perhaps a few incarnations or so from now, we will be born on an Earth where the global elite, the Syrians, and humans who vibrate within their frequency band, will no longer exist in our world. The ones who do exist there are people quite similar to us, who are more into expressing love, compassion, and understanding. Our reality will be less and less dense. This doesn't mean that the Syrians and the global elite have lost their stronghold, they will still be here on Earth, doing their thing, but in another reality, because of the difference in frequencies. However, the negative forces and the humans who chose to follow them will not move to a world, thousands of light years away, like the channeled sources suggest, but will still be here, on a lower frequency version of Earth. Albeit, if the Syrians get it the way they want it, some people probably will be moved to another planet. We can only speculate. Now, many of us will not return to Earth for a very long time after this lifetime is over. Does that come as a shock? Well, we are the forerunners, and our job is to build the energy so that the rest of humanity can make their choices based on a knowledge base that will soon come more and more to the surface in the mass consciousness. Those who wake up due to our work will be the ones who build the new Earth, the one which will eventually not be able to house the lower vibrational invader forces with their global control. When our job is done, it's time for many of us to move on. Of course, there will be those among us who still choose to stay here and come back again after this lifetime is over and help building this new world, and that's a very noble thing to do. And there are those among us who look forward to living in the new world, because Mother Earth, the goddess, is after all one of the most beautiful planets in the Milky Way galaxy, and am sure it will be even more beautiful when experienced from a higher dimension.